Ya, jadi diskusi ini akan berlangsung dalam dua bahasa. Pak Serian George akan bicara dalam bahasa Inggris presentasi nanti, yang lain akan berbicara dalam bahasa Indonesia, memberikan komentar. Kemudian nanti ketika waktu pertanyaan bisa pakai bahasa Indonesia atau bahasa Inggris. Kita berterima kasih pada Sana Jeffrey yang juga peneliti tamu di Pusat Studi Agama dan Demokrasi yang akan membantu menerjemahkan semua pembicaraan dalam bahasa Indonesia di sini. Jadi bebas saja pakai bahasa Inggris atau bahasa Indonesia. Ya, tadi seperti sudah disampaikan Irsyad, mungkin ini waktu yang tepat untuk membicarakan buku ini, atau bahkan saya sempat berpikir mungkin terlambat karena fenomena-fenomena yang dibahas di sini sebetulnya kita sudah tahu, sudah lama menggelisahkan kita, tapi pembicaraan ya berputar-putar dan peristiwa berjalan terus. Saya kira buku ini memberikan terobosan atau tawaran pemikiran yang cukup segar untuk pertama melihat sebetulnya apa peristiwa-peristiwa yang di sini disebut sebagai head spin itu, dan juga bagaimana mengatasinya dengan cara-cara yang mungkin saya kira buku ini juga memberikan beberapa tawaran solusi yang menarik. So I was saying that this is a timely book and probably actually it's a bit too late because we should have discussed about this further. And it will be also very interesting. You wrote the book in 2016, and after you published the book, there have been a number of very interesting developments in places which you specifically study: India, Indonesia, and United States. Very big changes. So it's timely, but also probably we should have talked about it earlier. Beberapa perkembangan terakhir di Indonesia juga saya kira menunjukkan kasus-kasus yang dibahas di dalam buku ini. Jadi di buku ini, oh ya, saya mengingatkan ada satu fotokopi yang disebarkan di sini, yang ada cover buku di sini. Saya kira ini ringkasan yang sangat baik ditulis oleh Irsyad untuk yang belum pernah membaca bukunya. Jadi ada pembahasan mengenai apa itu fenomena yang di sini disebut head spin, yang memberikan cara baru untuk melihat peristiwa-peristiwa yang kita alami di sini dan di beberapa negara terakhir ini. Kemudian ada tiga studi kasus. Yang pertama di Amerika Serikat, yang kedua di Indonesia, yang ketiga di India. Tiga negara yang sangat berbeda dengan latar belakang keagamaan yang juga berbeda, tapi ada fenomena yang sama yang disebut head spin ini. Dan kemudian di bab terakhir didiskusikan bagaimana kita menghadapi fenomena ini. Saya tidak akan berpanjang lebar, saya akan langsung mempersilahkan Serian George. Dia akan bicara 20 menit, kemudian nanti masing-masing akan memberikan respon kira-kira sekitar 5 menit, dan kemudian kita bisa diskusi sama-sama. So the floor is yours. Are you going to sit? Yeah, please.
Okay, good morning and selamat pagi. I'm sorry that my Bahasa Indonesia is not good enough for me to deliver this in the national language, but I hope that you will forgive me for being a very culturally insensitive Singaporean. Yeah. Bahasa Melayu is of course the national language of Singapore. And one of our 4 official languages. I studied Malay for 10 years in school, but I'm just basically bad at languages. So people keep trying to teach me languages and I never succeed. I'm now based in Hong Kong. I'm not even trying to understand or learn Cantonese. I just know it is a mountain that is too steep for me. So let me start with that deep apology. Thank you for my hosts, the Tempo Institute and Pusat and other institutions, Paramedina Foundation for organizing this. It is a great pleasure to come back to Indonesia, which has been a very stimulating place to think about this issue. My research focuses on the problems of fear and hate and how they are used as political weapons. And I am looking in particular at what are the implications or the impact of this on free speech. Because I am mainly a communication scholar. My main interest is freedom of expression issues. And I started getting interested in this issue of religious intolerance because I could see around the world that religious intolerance was becoming a threat to free media, freedom of expression, in places where, in the past we only used to worry about threats from intolerant governments or threats from big business. Now suddenly it seems we also have to be worried about the threat from the people themselves. Intolerant publics can be a threat to freedom of expression. And of course, this is very much a global phenomenon, unfortunately. We see around the world various protests over perceived offense, over things like where a mosque is being built or where a temple is being built. A book that is published, cartoons that are published, videos that are released, films, it doesn't end. We see in the US, the rise of a president who also took intolerance to new levels. And of course, many people were alarmed at what they saw, the images they saw in Jakarta last November and the outcome of your gubernatorial elections last month. I am aware that some of those reports are probably exaggerated, and I would agree, I hope, right? I hope none of you will contradict me that the ugly campaigning that we saw in the Jakarta elections does not mean that Indonesia is about to fall off the cliff, right? Or that Indonesia is about to become another classic case of a failed democracy. I see no evidence that Indonesia will stop being what it is now, which is basically a consolidated democracy. But clearly this problem of intolerance on the ground is something that is unpleasant, that causes harm to innocent people, and that is what I'm worried about. So I don't share the nightmare scenario or the pessimism of those who feel that Indonesia has made a big U-turn, right? And is going to become like other failed democracies. But that doesn't mean that we should not be worried about the trends of intolerance that we see now and then in your country. In many countries, not just in Indonesia, but we saw it in India in 2014, in the US, I find that people sometimes say that, well, we shouldn't be too worried about election rhetoric because that is just elections. Yeah? We shouldn't be too worried that in Donald Trump's campaign, he was Muslim bashing. We shouldn't be too worried about Narendra Modi's campaign and how he was using anti-Muslim, or his followers were using anti-Muslim rhetoric, because that's just elections. And this is what politicians do, right? They will say anything to be elected. What is more important is what happens after elections. And I know that some of that same logic is being used now by my Indonesian friends. Don't be too concerned about the kind of language and rhetoric that was heard in the Jakarta elections. But in a way, I agree. I think we need to be politically sophisticated and understand that politicians will be politicians. They will say things during elections to be elected. But I think it would be naive to assume that the culture and the tone of elections will stop on election day, right? I think it is a kind of pollution, yeah, that can influence the country after the elections as well. Certainly, that is what we have seen in the US. The intolerance that was used for election purposes in the US has continued. And certainly that is what we have seen in India as well. Yeah? The intolerance that got Modi, that helped Modi win election in 2014 has made India an uglier place even after the election. So I think it would be foolish looking at the way other countries have evolved to assume that the unpleasantness that is seen in an Indonesian election is just confined to the election. Yeah? It can be a problem for the long term as well. Let me explain what I mean by this term hate spin. Yeah? I see it as a two-sided strategy. On one side is the problem of incitement, yeah? Or what we normally talk about as hate speech. These are words that are used to persuade the audience to cause harm to a vulnerable group, yeah? Whether it is a religious minority or racial minority or LGBTI groups or whatever. Yeah? So words that are used to instigate others to cause harm against a smaller group. This is a very old problem. Yeah? Through the history of mankind, I guess, every genocide, ethnic cleansing, colonial incursion has involved incitement. When conquerors come and treat the people in a particular place as subhuman and worthy of being just wiped out, it always includes incitement or hate speech. Yeah, so it's an old problem. But I think there's another side to hate spin that I find very interesting, and I think that we have not thought about or talked about enough, and this is the problem of manufactured indignation. Yeah? If we think of incitement as the giving of offense for political purposes, this other half of hate spin, indignation, is the taking of offense for political purposes. So I see hate spin as this double strategy. Yeah? You have intolerant groups that on the one hand are using hate speech or incitement to ask others to attack a third group, but on the other hand are using what sounds like a defensive strategy. It's claiming that we have been offended by someone else's conduct. Yeah? Claiming to be the victim. But I argue that this style of politics, of claiming to be the victim against someone else's offensive behavior or speech, is also actually an aggressive political act. Yeah? Both of these both of these sides of hate spin have policy implications, right? We need to think about what can we do, what can the law do to address it. First, on the hate speech side, on the incitement side, human rights norms and human rights defenders are quite clear. Yes, freedom of speech is important, but it is not absolute, and hate speech is something that should be tackled even though there is freedom of expression. Why do they say that? Because in the case of hate speech, we cannot trust the free marketplace of ideas to deliver us all good things. Yeah? Those of us who believe in freedom of expression would like to think that if you just have maximum freedom of speech, good ideas will ultimately conquer bad ideas. Yeah? In most cases, I think that is true. Yeah? That is why most countries try to have more and more freedom of expression, because they know that this open contest of ideas is a good thing. Yeah? And if you allow this open contest of ideas, ultimately the good ideas will win. So that is the market analogy of expression. But hate speech is a special case. Hate speech is a special case where we cannot trust the open marketplace of ideas to deliver the right outcomes. Why is that? Because when it comes to hate speech, the different players are not on a level playing field. Yeah? you're talking about vulnerable groups, vulnerable minorities that cannot compete in the open marketplace of ideas. They will always lose, right? They will lose because they are too small. Yeah? There's just not enough of them to fight against the bad stuff that is being said about them, or because they have historical disadvantages. Yeah? So they may be quite a big group, but because they've always been a marginalized minority, whatever they say lacks power. They don't have access to the media, for example. So yes, they can say it, but it is not going to protect them against the lies that are being said about them. Yeah? So this is something that human rights workers have always been concerned about, the fact that this marketplace of ideas does not help vulnerable groups, which is why international human rights law, for example, the International Convention on Civil and Political Rights, says very clearly that incitement is something not only that governments can take action against, but governments must take action against, right? So the ICCPR Article 20 says governments must prohibit incitement.